Okay, full house and afternoon. It is the most difficult thing to follow such an amazing speaker like His Excellency, but I love him for setting the stage for us, talking about how AI will change the world as we know it. Having said that, just to make sure that you're all here with us, I want to ask a quick question. Who of you uses a data center today? All right. The mere fact that not every single hand in the room is up shows that you should be listening for the next couple of minutes because we have a thought leader, a founder, and an absolute expert in the space here with us. But I wouldn't want this to start without saying a huge thank you to the Dubai AI campus, to say a huge thank you for His Excellency Khalfan Belhoul and the entirety of the UAE government that is creating an entire bed for us, all of us, to come here from all around the world and share our knowledge over here. I look around the room, I see more than 70 nationalities just looking in the room, and I think this is a most amazing achievement and something that the DIFC, the Dubai government, and the UAE government needs a big round of applause. Give them a big round of applause, everyone. Alrighty, Heath, I'm actually looking forward to this because the world as we know it is simply not the world as the one that we live in anymore, right? And you know, we just saw that not many hands went up when we talk about data centers, but really our phones go through data centers, our cars go through data centers, our TV, our email, everything that we do is on data centers. Tell us a little bit about the landscape of data centers as we know them and AI. Yeah.
Actually, you look at today is, if you look at the world's largest companies, so which generally we talk about as the Magnificent Seven, all of them have substantial infrastructure in data centers globally, and just more than that also there's other facets in terms of delivering data, but these are like there's over 8,000 data centers globally and growing like topsy-turvy. And really, when you look at it, like the data model that's being run today is like it's the biggest model in the world. If you would aggregate the market capitalizations of all those companies, we're talking, you know, trillions and trillions of dollars in that way. So it's an enormous landscape. And it's growing like a weed. It is growing very quickly because of all what's happening.
Right, and with that growth, can you talk to us a little bit about usage? Because, you know, when we think about the cloud, when we think about YouTube, when we think about these services, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is to call them clouds, right? Which are these beautiful things that are flying around. Talk to us a little bit about the usage, and particularly, I know, Holon, you guys have a focus on green and actually greening those data centers. I'd love to understand, what does that footprint look like today already?
Yeah. So it's kind of like, firstly, this conversation about clouds always, I think, you think it goes, you know, into the cloud, into something, and most people always this is the cloud, but really it's actually physical, tangible infrastructure.
Right.
And we're talking, like, if you look at the estimates, there's probably a couple of $1 trillion that have actually gone into building that infrastructure. And by 2027, it's estimated that those big companies, we all know they are, the Amazons, the Googles, etc., we'll end up probably spending $1 trillion just in 2027 on supporting data. This is the compute, this is the storage, this is the data centers, construction, and that number is going to go up a lot just because of what we're seeing in the landscape with the tsunami of data that's coming. AI is like in this machine-to-machine world, we're just generating more and more data. So that in many cases poses like a challenge, a sustainability challenge, when you think that the world's becoming very aware of the consumption of energy of data centers.
Right. And these data centers, I mean, these are physical locations, you know, these are heavy power consumption organizations for all intents and purposes. How's that impacting the sustainability goals of these companies?
Yeah, so it's kind of like if you think about, as we were starting to realize, like a ChatGPT search or query, we're understanding that takes a lot more energy consumption. It's like up to 10 times more energy consumption than a typical Google search in that way. So, of course, the conversations globally is like, oh, well, how are we going to be able to power the AI future, the productivity that actually we want out of this as we move forward.
How are we going to power that?
So this is quite interesting. So like there is, in the existing data center space, of course, there's lots of movements on to try to get as much green energy as a source of energy to fuel them. The other thing that we're seeing, and it's we're seeing like also a lot of data generation is now requiring support in more like prime locations, which they generally call edge.
Right.
So this is sort of like what Holon's doing, is actually providing data services in prime locations. We use immersion cooled systems, which are traditionally the data center infrastructure today has mostly been air cooled data centers. So you think of like a big fridge that blows air over all the racks to try to cool all the compute that's being utilized. But advances that we're seeing are actually enabling us to actually run that compute in vastly more efficient ways. Bitcoin's shown the way in this, and we're doing the same thing in terms of actually using immersion cool processes. And that also, when you start going down that pathway of putting hardware into fluid, you start to realize a data center looks very different. And we can do a lot smaller data centers that also then can be fueled more with green energy as well, and service a lot of the edge use cases that we're coming up, that we're seeing proliferating, like in digital twin technologies.
I want to drill down on what you just said. So you're taking the data center and you're immersing it in fluid?
Yeah, so in the sense, the traditional data center is like, when you look at it, a lot of the infrastructure that goes into it's around the fridge aspect of it, like creating the Miele fridge that can go keep everything really cool. But you're kind of hoping your rack, that you got your compute in, gets a little bit of that air. All right. So now, when you move into immersion cooling and you stunk the actual hardware into fluid, suddenly that problem disappears. You actually got vastly more energy efficient solution, 40% more energy efficient than using air-cooled techniques. And the other thing about it, you can actually extract the heat out of the machines and recycle that energy. And we think that's probably the other area going forward when you look at those, and particularly in places like Europe, where energy efficiency is at the fore. We've seen what's happened with the conflict, it's driven energy prices very high. We're seeing a real focus now on how do we not only fuel with green energy, but how do we recycle that energy. And we think that's an exciting prospect as well to help us deliver cost-effective solutions in the right places in terms of supporting data in that way.
Okay, that's super interesting, because essentially what we're doing here, we're putting this entire model on its head. We're not cooling it anymore, we're emerging it, right? And like you said, I think a lot of this innovation came from Bitcoin mining. I mean, that's where I saw it first, and it's good to see that this is now taking shape. The UAE has made it a point to be on the map globally when it comes to emerging technologies, right? If it's AI, if it's blockchain, if it's quantum computing, we see elements of those being driven by government, we see elements of those being driven by the private sector. I'd love to understand, as Holon, a two-part question. First of all, why the UAE? And second of all, how are you advancing that entire vision that the UAE has?
Yeah. So the first thing that's very clear, as you indicate, the leadership here has like a clear strategy. Like, that's the thing. I come from Australia. I live in Sydney, Australia. We just don't have the same vision. So and we're not really like you wouldn't call us like a technology hub, I don't think. No. So here there's a real focus on supporting the development of these technologies. And so, in particular, innovation, it's not easy, of course, when you're creating the future. There's no playbook. It's not like you can go and do a Google search and find the answer. Like, you've got to work from first principles on these things, and you really do need the support of a community, a whole of ecosystem approach. So in that way, that's like, we can see that commitment. I mean, I've been coming up here since 2019, and I see it very, very clearly. I think also, like, as you said, on the Bitcoin side, there's a real understanding of immersion cooling. Like, it's fantastic. Like, so conversations I'm having up here already, like, people understand this. There's experts in the field.
Right.
And then also on distributed storage using that we run, and then of course the blockchain. So we run like immutable data structures, which are critically important, and
Can I pause you there?
Yeah.
Because I think that essence in itself, immutable data structures.
Yeah.
What does that mean, and how is that different, radically different to what we're doing right now?
Yeah, so it's kind of like the interesting thing for me is like I remember when I go back in time, and I kind of the idea of Holon, or where it's kind of started for me, it was around 2015, 2016.
Right.
And I realized I was looking, I could see what the future for Amazon, AWS was, Google, Microsoft, so we could see it was like very bright future with what they're doing. But when you start looking at the way we architected the internet and pulled everything together through what's predominantly like location-based addressing, so it means like HTTP really sends you today, guys, to a computer, and then you reference the data. So what does that mean? That means I've actually got to trust the third-party provider to do the right thing. Of course, when you start looking at that model, you say, well, there's an obvious, conundrum there. And then suddenly you realize, well, why don't we just actually take a fingerprint of the data itself, and you can't change any pixel or anything of that data at all, and that ID that's driven from that, you know what you have. So that's like a key innovation, and represents a structural change in the way you can run data. And then of course, what we with that content addressable data structure, we then use the blockchain for verifiability to prove through time what we're actually doing with that data. So then when you look at, say, an app, like you look at AI, AI needs provenance. That's the key. A lot of people, I'm sure that a lot of discussions around this is one of the biggest problems. So when you have these immutable data structures, then you've got a really good handle on provenance and how you actually can manage the data, quality of data, security around it. So that was really like the thing that I could see back even in 2015-16, that if we started to architect and build an infrastructure around that type of system, then we actually solve a lot of things in the way we can run data today, but then we also enable a lot of things that are not even possible today.
Right, I love it. And I'm a privacy buff myself, I think, and I've signed, I don't know if you all know, but there's something called the Open Letter Against the Advancement of AI, where leading researchers, again, from Microsoft, from Google, some of these guys that have developed these artificial intelligence that we are using today, are saying, hey, pause for a second, introduce a level of accountability towards that AI before you advance it, right? And I'd invite you all to check it out, and if it appeals to you, maybe to sign it yourself. And I love that you guys are working in this space. I want to make this a little bit, we've spoken about data centers, not necessarily something that everyone can put their finger on. We've spoken about what you and why the UAE. Let's make this a little bit more factual. What can I do with this kind of stuff?
Yeah, so to give you a great example, and actually, guys, we've got this actually on our booth. You'll be able to see it with one of our great partners, ArcLive, who runs a digital twin technology. So they basically put sensors into buildings, and through gateways, we can then pick up information on the energy footprint of that building in real time.
Okay. In real time?
In real time.
Nice.
We stream that into our systems, and then, because we run verifiable data systems, then for somebody like Lloyd's, a bank in the UK, who wants to be able to actually prove to society that we do have a home that's green, and they want to actually support with a green mortgage, they can then meet their regulatory and compliance obligations in regards to that, because everybody also realizes in a world that we're all focused on going green, there's this conversation around greenwashing, and the question is kind of how do we actually get transparency and measurement in that process. So that's a very good tangible example, particularly when you look at CRE, commercial real estate companies globally. One of their biggest challenges is how do we actually decarbonize those portfolios? How do we go green with those portfolios? So obviously, like one of the prime sort of like where we see a great opportunity is to help commercial real estate companies in terms of actually their sustainable finance objectives as a result of this technology.
Okay. You also spoke about digital twins. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the use cases other than in sustainability.
Yeah. So we also have another one of our partners here today, Magno, is also again, we sort of on properties, like again, they're looking at actually making the whole property process a lot easier in terms of, again, when you start thinking about sharing information in that way, so and documenting the information. And I think this is like the big idea, like you see, what we're quite excited about is essentially, because we run like an open data system, where it's trusted and people can share and collaborate. And we know as we collaborate, there's great benefits to that. And today, mostly what happens as we work is we tend to work with data in silos. And this has been the challenge. So, and Economy, you can kind of think about that, the applications that are being run that are really gathering that data. So many of those big companies today are just running applications that are gathering that data and using 40-year-old protocols, 40, 50-year-old protocols. We're actually shifted to a new protocol that says we can now share data and work in a trusted way. And that, we think, has huge benefits for society. Like, as another example, from the digital twin side, it's like we have genomic data sets where we allow researchers can work globally with that data and know what they're actually working with confidence in that way. So this is probably going to go to the heart of a lot of the conversation around how do we actually, we know we need to share data, but how can we do this in a trusted way with privacy addressed, security concerns addressed. And again, that's when you start looking at the innovation at the protocol level here is quite like, wow, we can actually do this in that way. Of course, the infrastructure needs to be built. This is not this takes time to do. Like Amazon Web Services just didn't appear overnight. I mean, it actually started in 2006. The data center space really, as a whole, is quite young when you think about it. Hasn't been around that long. But the next iteration of this, particularly to support things like the metaverse or any of the Web3 related activities, you really do need the data structures that we work with, and that's why one of the networks we work around on the Filecoin network and IPFS. This is kind of used very extensively right across the blockchain ecosystem today.
Okay, so I'd love to, because for the audience right now, they're looking at this and they're saying, okay, AI check, blockchain check, sustainability check. Someone played buzzword bingo and created a company. But really, these technologies work in unison with each other. I'd love for you to walk us really why blockchain, why AI, and why sustainability, and how they're all really interlinked.
Yeah, so the first time on why blockchain is like, it really comes down to governance, having an independent source of governance. When you start to realize it's just a very, it's probably the most economic way that we can achieve regulatory compliance. Yeah. And it looks like I come from a financial services background. The
no-brainer actually.
It's no-brainer. Yeah. When I look at it, I don't think anybody's been in financial services. The red tape's only gone one way. Right. And so I think from that perspective, when you look at really game-changing blockchain solutions, it's really around the governance mechanism here. So
that's why blockchain. Why AI?
So why AI is because like the world that we're going into in terms of automation, and this is kind of like we're building infrastructure for the world of autonomy. Right. And that again, so if you've got these immutable data structures with verifiability that are trusted, we also have with the blockchain. Yeah. We also have with the blockchain and Relay, we have smart contracting as well. Then you can start allowing your AIs to work for you. Right. In an autonomous way, and all that trust in that structure means and the computer needs to actually have trust as opposed to some of the mechanisms we're doing that today. So that allows to a vastly more efficient way to run autonomy at a scale that, like, the scale of this is like going to be very, very large. Right. So we need to, over time, when you start to think about from that side, is how do we run data more efficiently? Right. So even like the protocol and the way it's set up is to actually allow the pipe to expand what we can do. And then of course on the infrastructure side of this, what we're looking to is sustainability is like, really it's kind of like, it's not only dropping the cost of like the energy consumption that goes in, and when we look forward, it starts becoming clear. I think for a lot of what we need needs to be immersion cooled to drive the compute, because there's step changes in compute and energy usage. But it's not only that, it's like the distributed nature of Web3 networks allows you to essentially have the software doing the work and managing the risk and reducing the capex materially. Now this is like, this is a great thing. This is like one of the things I'm really excited about, that I think over time that we can material low operating costs and also material low capex, a better resource allocation to achieve what we need to, where we need to go.
As someone that really believes in a concerted effort of all of these technologies working together to the benefit of all of humanity, I couldn't have set you up to make a better answer to this. Give them a big round of applause, everyone. Thank you very much for listening carefully. Thank you.